Good morning, everybody, to today's Telford Wrekin Council Cabinet meeting, virtual as ever, it seems, and just to welcome everybody who's attending today. If I can ask those people who are at the meeting formally just to mute your mics and then unmute when I come to you, and if you want to ask a question or make a contribution, please do raise your hand on the indicator. If I don't see you, then if you could enter something in the comments chat, please, that'd be really helpful. We've got quite a full agenda today, so we'll try and canter through as we go along. We are being streamed on Facebook and Twitter, I think, so be mindful of that. Apologies for absence. I think we're all here. Stacey, is that right?
Yep, no apologies received.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest at this point or before the agenda item? None declared at the moment. Minutes of the previous meeting, those have been previously circulated. Are we in favour of those as a true record?
Move them, yeah.
Thank you, Richard. I will sign those at the earliest opportunity. And then we go to item 4, which is the 2020-21 Financial Monitoring Report. I'll ask Councillor Ray Evans, the Cabinet Member for Finance and Governance, to introduce this report. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Leader. Can I start by putting this report into context? Over the recent months, the Council has been working to the best of its abilities to do what's been needed to support, care and protect our community. Whilst the government have provided some additional funding to us, it's only a third of what we need. Nationally, the LGA have said that the government need to provide a further £6 billion to provide to local authorities to top up the £3.2 billion that has already been provided, so that we are not alone in facing this enormous pressures on our budget this year. This comes hot on the heels of the loss of £15 billion in central government funding to local government over the last decade, during which time we have had to make £123 million of ongoing budget savings. So whilst I have asked officers to do a thorough review of our budgets, the scope for further budget savings is obviously much more limited than it was. So what does this mean for the Council this year? Our best estimates of the pressures that we face are summarised in the table at the top of the second page of the report, which shows that we have projected pressures on service budgets of £20 million arising from additional costs and lost income. We also expect a reduction in income from council tax and business rates of £8 million, giving a total pressure of just under £29 million. Towards this, the government have given us grants of £10.1 million, but that still leaves us a net in-year budget pressure of £18.6 million. The main variations are shown at the bottom of page 2 of the report, and the overall budget position is summarised in section 4.2. Variations over £250,000 are included in the report in section 4.3, and capital is summarised in section 6 of the report. Cabinet, you can see that we urgently need the government to do what they've said they'll do and provide the funding we need. On the 16th of March, Robert Jenrick said, "This government stands with local councils at this difficult time. Everyone needs to play their part to help the most vulnerable in society and support their local economy. The government will do whatever is necessary to support these efforts. The time has now come for them to deliver on this commitment and to provide the much needed additional funding for us." Cabinet, I move the recommendations in section 2 of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Is there a seconder for those recommendations?
I'll second them.
Thank you, Richard. And if I can move to Cabinet members for contributions, please. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, it's harsh really on councils. We've seen that with the LGA and their lobbying of the government that, you know, the councils did do what the Minister asked about doing what you can do, and we stepped up to the plate. We're one of the top councils in giving out the grants. We supported our communities through our helplines, and what do we get? We get a big black hole, and really we need the government to step in now and help support us, because we are delivering for the most vulnerable in our communities, and we will continue to do that, but it gets harder and the challenges get harder. We've gone through all this austerity over the last 10 years, and now it's time for the government to step up to the plate and give the councils the resources they need.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Watling, Paul Watling.
Hi, sorry about that. Ray, I think it's a good report. I think you're exactly right. The extra work we've done with our communities across Telford and Wrekin to ensure that our people in Telford and Wrekin are safe during this emergency has left a huge deficit for us. The government needs to take notice of that, and notice of the extra work that's been done by councils, because I don't believe that's seen in Westminster as it is seen locally by local people, and we've got good evidence of that.
Thank you, Paul. Can I go to Councillor Healy?
Yeah, thank you. It feels to me like we're being hit by a double whammy here, because not only have we stepped up to support our community through this very difficult time, and that's incurred additional costs, but also because of the years of austerity, in order to maintain services, the council has diversified, has had an increasing reliance on our commercial activities in order to support those core budgets. And of course, with lockdown and the closure of those activities, we've lost that income stream. And so we've been hit twice, both by increased expenditure and reduced income. And I think it's the latter particularly that doesn't seem to be recognised by government at all. And it feels like we did what government wanted over the last 10 years, which is to look at other ways of raising revenue, but now that doesn't seem to figure in their thoughts on how to support councils during this, and I think it really needs to. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Can I go to Shirley Reynolds, please?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I think it's actually the harsh reality. We have done what was asked. We've protected, cared and invested in our community. We've delivered over 52,000 meals to our children. We've maintained care, contact with residents. We kept them safe. And we provided that security blanket to ensure our residents were cared for. We need the government to stand by their promise. We have done what's been asked. So now we need them to live up to their promise. They need to do what they said, and they actually need to do the right thing for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. If I go to Councillor Tomlinson, Bill Tomlinson, Leader of the Lib Dems, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I echo the thoughts of everybody else today, particularly, with adult social services, everybody's seen what's gone on, the emergencies and the care homes, and we've had to try and provide additional care for those care homes, understandably. And it doesn't seem right where the government can make this promise to give us the additional funding, and yet there's no indication yet. Two technical questions I wish to ask is, first of all, after yesterday's budget announcements, if the council are aware of any new initiatives or any new announcements the government has made to support local authorities over and above what they've already promised. And the other small one is there's 8 million in council tax and business rates, which we're going to be down on this year. Is it possible that may come through with a delay next year? But yeah, we are being shortchanged, and I'm sure Andrew from the Conservative group would support all of us in saying that the government have got to keep local authorities going, because it's us that are providing some of the primary care out there to the residents that are really vulnerable and desperately need this money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. If we go to Councillor Reid, the Leader of the Conservative group. I'm not hearing you, Andrew. I don't know if you're on mute or whether you've got issues with your connection.
How's that?
That's better, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, can I thank Bill for speaking on my behalf? That's very kind of you, Bill. I look forward to a future relationship like that. Well, these are unprecedented times, aren't they? And financial pressures apply right across the board. and they're providing severe challenges to individuals, our community, local businesses and organisations. And within that, not least, of course, is local governments. And I suspect that the shortfall right across the board for local governments is probably slightly more than Councillor Evans actually mentioned. However, the future business rates review, government spending review, our own financial settlement, and they all present opportunities for us to lobby government to make sure that our finances continue on a sound footing. That's only post-COVID, but that's for the long-term future as well. This council's links to Conservative MPs who represent Telford and Wrekin in Parliament have never been so critical, and this administration should now reflect perhaps on its past conduct in certain instances to make sure that it plays a proper and grown-up role in dealing with the borough's future. Now, I, of course, as I've already said and I've offered on a number of occasions, remain happy to help where possible to secure a stable financial future for this borough and its community. However, my question that you were unable to answer at the last Cabinet meeting is that this authority still has usable balances and reserves approaching £20 million. It's public money that's put aside for mending the roof on a rainy day, and at the moment it's not only pouring down, but due to COVID, the roof is also missing. Now, the government have made promises about meeting the funding gap. We'll see what other announcements that have come. There doubtless will be other announcements as we go on, and as I say, not least the settlement itself. But clearly, local government has stepped up to the plate. It has delivered for local communities, and as I've said, here in Telford and Wrekin, it has done that, and I think it's done it pretty well. There's no manual for COVID at all, and it's been very much an unknown process. But it is that future relationship with local government that this authority needs to sort out.
Thank you, Andrew. I think you meant future relationship with MPs at the end rather than local government. I think I can only talk for ourselves. I'm not quite sure what your relationship's like with our local members of parliament, but I speak to both MPs on a regular basis, and I will continue to do that in order to get a fair deal for Telford and Wrekin and our council and our residents. I think it's really important to just note, though, that over the last 10 years, we've seen a £120 million plus cut in our budget from this government. So despite the fact that we've got two Conservative MPs with a relationship with, that hasn't helped us over the last few years. But we are hopeful. We do want to work constructively with the government and with our members of parliament. We've got the lowest council tax in the West Midlands. We don't have car park charges in our district centres. We've got a huge amount of efficiencies that we've drived out. We've increased our commercial income, as already been mentioned, often being criticised and attacked by yourself and your group whilst doing so, and that is really the position. In regards to reserves, as you always say, Andrew, once you use the reserves, once they've gone. And we will use reserves. We have used reserves to cash flow the council's operations. We'll continue to do that, but we'll have to do that in a very, very sensible way because, as you say, Andrew, you can repair the roof with the reserves, but if next year or later on this year, because of COVID, there's another huge storm, then the roof will be broken without a budget to fix the roof. So we do need to think about it pragmatically. Right, Councillor Evans, did you want to come back on any of the comments made?
I'll just answer Bill's two questions and maybe add something to help Andrew. You asked if the announcements yesterday had any obvious help for us, Bill. On first look, no. There was a large sum of money, as I understand, for public sector, which he didn't talk about in the announcement, which is in the paper. But actually, the vast majority of that money is going for PPE. So at this moment, it doesn't look like there's very much for us from his announcement. The other question you asked about the loss in revenue, One of the announcements the government has very recently made, but we don't have a lot of details over, is that we will, it looks like, have the ability to spread the tax deficit over 3 years. So that may be a help. And finally, Andrew, you may want to know that we will be looking to bring a revised budget in the autumn, when hopefully some of these imponderables will be known. And I completely back the leader in terms of raiding those reserves at this moment would be imprudent. They're there for a reason. It isn't because we've forgotten to spend them. They're there as part of our strategic plan.
Thank you, Ray, for that. It's been moved. It's been seconded. I'll take silence as assent to the recommendations. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we'll go on to our next report then, which is Better Homes for All. This is a joint report between Councillor David Wright and Councillor Richard Overton. David, I'll come to you first.
Thank you, Leader. I wanted to continue our discussion about roofs, perhaps, which is appropriate, by presenting this report on Better Homes for All. As you'll remember, last month we launched the housing strategy for consultation, and one of our key objectives in that is to make the best use of our existing homes. And this further reflects our council plan and our commitment to give residents access to suitable housing right across the borough. Homes that are in serious disrepair, without adequate heating, homes that are overcrowded, long-term empty or poorly managed by landlords present challenges that we're committed to tackling as a council. We launched the Better Homes for All programme in 2018, and it's based on the principles of education, encouragement and enforcement, so that we see an improvement in the management and maintenance of property in the private rented sector. And we have had considerable success, and I'm sure my colleague Councillor Overton will talk a little bit more about this in a few moments. We've licensed 258 houses in multiple occupation, including bringing prosecutions to address poorly managed HMOs. We've ensured compliance with more than 400 enforcement notices to bring properties in the private sector up to standard. We issued the first banning order in England, which prevents a particular landlord locally from working in the property industry for up to 5 years. And we have been providing tenants with advice when they're faced with eviction or suffering harassment from landlords. And we've had 69 referrals into our vulnerability support project. We also provide ongoing support through our homelessness team to people with complex personal circumstances to ensure that they can try and sustain their tenancies and try and prevent them from becoming homeless. As we all know, the private rented market is continuing to grow in the borough. We saw a 13% increase in 2018-19, and we'll continue to be committed to progressing our Better Homes for All programme and use an intelligence-based approach to target action and local areas where we see significant problems. We also know that COVID-19 will have an impact on this, and many residents will face hardship. There'll be issues around paying rent or eviction over the coming months, and we're asking people to come to us early so that we can support them and in sustaining their tenancy, and we can talk to landlords and ensure that people are fairly treated right across the system. We've also, as we've talked about a number of times at Cabinet, been leading the way in terms of quality standards in the private rented sector through the operation of New Place. I'm pleased to report that at the latest site under construction, Row and View at Snedsill, we've let all but one property ahead of completion. There are no voids on neighbouring sites, and we've had 30 inquiries for properties coming up for relet in the last few months. As well as keeping a focus on the private rented sector, this report also addresses two key issues that have an impact on residents and in neighbourhoods, namely fuel poverty and empty properties. Now, in terms of fuel poverty, it is quite incredible, isn't it, that we have over 7,000 households in the borough who we believe are in fuel poverty. That's 11.5% of our total households. And that's focused in many of our least advantaged communities and also, interestingly, in rural areas. Fuel poverty is directly linked to health and well-being, as we know. Now, through our partnership with March's Energy Agency, we've already offered a free energy advice service for all residents with access to a range of energy saving measures. And the council directly supported residents to switch energy providers, many of them saving more than £500 a year. And that's obviously an important contribution when budgets are tight in people's households. In this report, we're extending the eligibility of residents to access funding to install installation and heating upgrades to homes. And we'll obviously integrate our approach with recent government announcements, which we've heard of in the last few hours and days. We'll be developing a new fuel poverty website to increase take-up of all the measures available and ensure that we bear down on fuel poverty right across the borough. We think this is an important agenda. It feeds into our aspirations for a carbon neutral borough by 2030. Just finally, on empty properties, based on government data, we believe there were 390 properties in Telford and Wrekin in October 2018 that had been empty for more than 2 years, and council tax records in May 2020 showed that over 700 had been empty for more than 6 months. Now, empty properties do no good for anyone. Obviously, they're homes that people could be living in. They often blight neighbourhoods, and they put downward pressure on property prices in neighbourhoods. So we want to prioritise this as an action point. So we're going to focus on properties that have been empty for more than 2 years and those that are in poor or dangerous condition. We're going to target areas and neighbourhoods where there are large numbers of empty properties. And we intend to do this through a coordinated approach. We appointed an empty properties officer in June, and we're going to drive this initiative forward over the coming months and years, using all the powers available at our disposal to enforce improvement and, as last resort, to enforce the sale of properties. So the action we're undertaking in this report is comprehensive. It builds on a series of housing reports that have been presented in recent months. Housing is moving up the agenda. It will continue to do so. We want to make sure we provide a safe, warm and suitable home for all residents across the borough, working with partners and with residents themselves. And I move the recommendation.
Thank you, David. And I'll come to Richard to second and to contribute, given it's a joint report. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I just wanted to briefly update Cabinet on the enforcement side of the Better Homes for All policy. We all know that the private rented sector has a key role to play in the housing market and helping deliver housing options choice for many people. And we know that there are lots of good private sector landlords out there, and that is why we continue to support landlords and letting agents through the Telford and Wrekin Landlord Accreditation Scheme. But there are also those landlords who don't support their tenants as much, sometimes neglecting their responsibilities entirely. And as we all know, that sometimes these properties can not only cause distress to the tenants, but also their communities. Over the past 2 years, Better Homes for All has delivered a range of measures to improve housing standards in the private rented sector. Our aim has been to take a balanced approach, as David said, to educate, encourage and enforce. We have targeted our resources to support the most vulnerable tenants, whilst also taking action against rogue landlords who persistently and willfully fail to meet their legal responsibilities. Through the enforcement, as David highlighted, we have licensed more than 200 houses in multiple occupation with 2 prosecutions to address poorly managed HMOs. We issued the first banning order and we ensure compliance with more than 400 enforcement notices to bring properties in the private sector up to standard. This is probably the most important aspect, as the support to help tenants get the much needed repairs and support they require with their landlord is paramount in making sure people are safe and well in their homes. In the last 12 months, we received over 800 service requests from tenants reporting repairs or complaining about their landlords. We also have been successful in gathering intelligence by working in partnership with the MATES operations, which have identified accommodation that does not meet fire safety standards, a number of unlicensed HMOs, as well as highlighting vulnerable tenants that require urgent support. Our neighbourhood enforcement officers have continued to tackle all aspects of antisocial behaviour in communities, and this will be a subject of a separate report to Cabinet in September. I second the proposals.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, David. Any Cabinet members first who wish to make a contribution? If you could just raise your hands, otherwise I'll go to the group leaders in a moment or two. No, okay, Bill. Sorry, forgive me, Bill. Carolyn.
Apologies. Yeah, I mean, obviously I welcome all the work that's being done around this agenda. Housing is, you know, it's the foundation on which we build our lives, isn't it? You know, you've got to have a safe, warm home to live in. for everything else then to really flow from that. So I particularly welcome the work around the fuel poverty. I think, in this day and age, the thought that people are having to choose between whether they can heat or eat is just, it's unacceptable. And so, it's really important that we put our energies into addressing that. And of course, as David said, Councillor Wright said, it does contribute to our climate change agenda. If we've got people who are desperately trying to heat homes, it's costing them a lot of money because they're in poorly insulated homes, and that's putting pressure on their budgets, but also it's adding to the carbon footprint of the borough. If we can help those householders to better insulate their homes, to have more efficient heating systems, then they benefit, and it has that wider benefit in terms of climate change. So I really welcome the work that's being done in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Bill, I come to you.
Yes, I welcome the report, particularly echo the words of Carolyn there with regard to the energy saving methods. It will certainly help people who've got fuel poverty, but also help the environment. So much heat. There was a programme on the other day on the BBC. Heat's still released from houses. So I welcome that. I welcome that government announcement, and if we can help residents tap into that funding, that would be great, because I know it's got to be spent between, I think, September and the end of March. So hopefully the companies that do provide this can beef themselves up to do that. The other one I really do welcome is now we've appointed an officer for empty properties. It can blight areas, and it can really upset neighbours when adjacent properties come into disrepair. So the only thing I would ask on that front, and I know this officer appointed in June has got an awful lot of workload probably, but I wondered if all members could be given the contact details of that. So if they are aware of others which the council may not be aware of in their own wards, we could at least make sure that that officer is fully aware. So if we could have the contact details, that would be great. But thank you very much for that initiative. I fully welcome it.
Thank you, Bill. I mean, just to add to Richard and Dave's, I think one of the things we have done absolutely over the last few years is forge really strong relationships with our social landlords in particular. And New Place, we are now the largest private sector landlord in Telford Wrekin through our wholly owned company, and that's made sure that we're driving standards up in our areas. And as Richard Overton quite rightly says, we absolutely want to work with socially responsible landlords, and we've got those here in Telford Wrekin. We want to work with them, but it's in everyone's interest, tenants, landlords, and homeowners, to chase bad landlords out of town, and that's what we will do through this agenda. So thanks very much for that, Richard and Dave. Andrew, can you make your comment brief, if you wouldn't mind? I did look through your indication again. You hadn't indicated.
Supporting and protecting tenants are able to pay their rent after August, should there be no further extension of the current scheme, is to be welcomed, as is bringing long-term empty residential properties back into use. The latter is common sense and should have been a priority of this administration long since. And I wonder if it would be possible to tap into the government's new funding to provide a further 6,000 places to tackle homelessness. The initiative surrounding tackling fuel poverty across the borough has to a great extent probably been surpassed by the great announcement by Richie Sunak yesterday of £2 billion worth of grants towards energy efficient home improvements. Now that will go a huge way to deal with issues of poverty in the borough, fuel poverty in the borough, and also allow landlords to improve their properties as well. I mean, it really is great news all round. I think I heard David suggest that in the light of yesterday's announcements, that some parts of the current strategy in the report here, proposed in the report, will be reconsidered, and perhaps we should look at retargeting some of those resources in view of the money that's becoming available.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I think I'll come to David just to wind up on that, but I think, David, you'll confirm that we've got some of the lowest amounts of empty homes in the whole of the country, and often, Andrew, there are very complicated reasons why homes are empty. For example, probate issues, family breakdowns. So I know it's easy as an opposition leader to simplify things to a simplistic level, but we have to deal with the real world, unfortunately, running the council. David, did you want to just come in on any of the points that Bill and Andrew made?
Well, in terms of empty homes, we're lower than the Unitary Authority average, so our performance is good, and that's really positive. I think what we need to do is focus on homes that have been empty long term, so that's why our strategy is to focus on properties that have been empty for over 2 years, and we can bear down on that through a number of mechanisms. So that's by looking at council tax billing, obviously looking at contacting owners, by trying to find out what their circumstances are and try and encourage and help them to get properties either let or onto the market. And it's really important work, and it's something we're very committed to. That's why we've invested in an empty properties officer that's going to be leading on that whole area of work. Just on the energy efficiency point, the point I was making was that we need to integrate our approach. So announcements that have come up in the last few days, clearly we'll need more detail about how they're going to work, and we need to integrate that into our approach locally. There's no problem with doing that. And as far as I'm concerned, I want to make sure that people get the maximum benefit they can out of any schemes announced. So we can go on and publish our eco targets locally, we can produce the website, and we can link that into energy efficiency measures that have been announced in the last few days. It would be good if we could develop strategies as well to try and encourage the advancement of local suppliers in terms of energy efficiency, insulation measures. So we don't. I hope the scheme isn't going to be designed so that it's just large-scale national companies that are providing this, but it gives some funding that can feed down into local companies. I'm sure that would be agreed right across the council chamber, and I'd hope that's something we could develop through the scheme.
Thank you, David. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Again, I'll take silence as agreement. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item then, which is item 6, the Health and Wellbeing Strategy. I'll come to Councillor Burford as the Cabinet Member for Health, and then I'll go to Kelly Milton, who's the Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, who's also joining us today. Andy Burford, please.
Thanks, Leader. I think, can I ask Kelly to go first? Because
forgive me, Andy. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Kelly first.
I think her input is an overview, which I think quite useful.
Okay. This Health and Wellbeing Strategy was endorsed by the Health and Wellbeing Board on the 10th of June. The board had received the draft proposals for the revised strategy back in February, before the full extent of COVID pandemic was evident. We all recognise the profound impact the pandemic has had on us all, our families and our communities. We all know the true impact is yet to be fully understood, as inequalities in health will have undoubtedly widened even further as a result of the pandemic. At the Health and Wellbeing Board, we held a 1-minute silence to think of all those who have lost their lives during the pandemic. And I would like to thank all of those frontline NHS and social care workers who have and continue to work tirelessly to treat and care for us when we are most vulnerable, and all those key workers and volunteers who have made sure we can access the basic services we all need during this pandemic. The refresh strategy highlights the progress we have made working in partnership since 2013, when the board was established. We will need to build upon this partnership working as we move forward, not only working with NHS colleagues and the community and voluntary sector, but a wider cross-section of partners, as we need to take action to halt widening health inequalities. The pandemic has clearly impacted on the wider detriments of health that drive these inequalities, such as business, economy and education. The Health and Wellbeing Board endorsed the priorities recommended last February, that is the Telford and Wrekin Integrated Place Partnership Programmes of building community capacity and resilience, prevention and healthy lifestyles, early access to advice and information, integrated care and support pathways. It agreed that we need to have a real focus on tackling health inequalities and improving emotional and mental well-being. And it further agreed to another priority to ensure we protect the public's health as much as possible from COVID in the future. I would like to recommend the revised Health and Wellbeing Strategy to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Kelly. If I can come to Andy Burford.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just to amplify, I suppose, a couple of points that Kelly's made. As Kelly says, our health and wellbeing strategy places an emphasis on inequalities in health, which have been widening nationally, with improvements in life expectation and healthy life expectation slowing down. And this is for the first time in over 100 years that they're actually slowing down. And for some sections of the population, they're actually going down. Now let's not mince words about that. This is a scandal. This is a national scandal. And what is more, we know, as Kelly says, that COVID-19 has made those inequalities worse. This situation is being made worse. So this update to our strategy speaks about the urgency and central importance of redoubling our efforts to combat these inequalities in our communities. But the report points to the fact that we have, in Telford Wrekin, had successes. We have actually managed to buck, if you look at page 3 of the report, to buck the national trend on life expectancy and several other indicators. And this is a tribute to some of the effective partnership work we've already been undertaking. For example, during COVID-19, we allocated funding to support voluntary organisations providing mental health support. We know that that's going to be one of the big demands on resources coming out of COVID-19. But that's only a one-off. And here's the point. We can only do so much, but having sufficient resources to do this requires national input. And that's where this strategy is dependent on some of the points that were being made earlier on the financial monitoring report. We have to have that capacity. Actually, it's not great. We can do huge amounts with little, but there are limits, and local authorities, ours included, are reaching the limits of what we can achieve to address these kinds of demands. Kelly spoke finally of our partnership locally, and a lot of the work that we're doing is about targeting the most disadvantaged communities, specific neighbourhoods. And she mentioned the partnership that we've developed here in Telford and Wrekin, which we call TWIP, which I won't bother spelling out in detail. It's not exactly an easy one to remember, but the crucial thing is that it's actually being effective in linking our work with that of the NHS and our voluntary and community partners, and we need it strengthened, and we need the capacity within it to do what we need to do to further this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. If I can come to Richard for questions or comments to both Andy and Kelly, please. Richard?
Yeah, I'll be brief. It's just a comment. I'm really proud of how public health came over to the council and how we've delivered on this strategy. And as Andy's mentioned, some key things, we've helped reduce health inequalities, but now with COVID, it's going to go the other way, sadly. And you know, the last report, the Better Homes for All policy is one of the wider determinants of health, really. Healthy housing, you know, the housing strategy that David delivered a few weeks ago that we're consulting on, and fuel poverty are some of the issues that create poor health. And you know, and usually poor housing is in some of the estates that we know about where people on low incomes are, and with the loss of jobs through COVID, this is going to be even more to be seen. So I think, you know, this report's really good. We do have a good partnership in building community capacity and resilience, and Paul's been doing a lot of work with partners and community centres to make that asset-based communities possible, but we have to do more. But as Andy says, we need the funding to do this.
Thank you, Richard. If I go to Councillor Watling, please. Paul Watling.
Hi, yeah. I just want to echo what Richard has said. Really, I mean, this is a corporate strategy as well. You know, seeing the way that we work with our communities to ensure that health outcomes are met, and working in partnership with those trusts across the borough who have already made so much impact with our communities, and during the COVID-19 disaster have been crucial for the council's response to dealing with that, the health both the health issues and also some of the poverty issues that have been that have risen with that disaster. I welcome the report. I think it's really good. I would say that being on the Health and Wellbeing Board, but I do believe that it's a positive report.
Thank you very much. There's no further people coming in, so we'll move to the vote. Again, I'll take silence as agreement. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, which is in respect of the Ofsted report.
I wanted to comment on the report.
Andrew, we've moved on now. I've given you lots of time to indicate. If you want to speak to Kelly or Andy after the meeting, that's fine.
You came
so if we go to the next item, if we can go to the next item, please, which is in regards to Ofsted. Shirley?
To comment on important issues.
Andrew, we're moving on now. Thank you. Shirley?
Thank you, Leader. The report today, it's a culmination of many years of hard work and dedication by our administration. It seems a lifetime ago we got the call from Ofsted, and during a very vigorous 3-week inspection period, all of children's services was scrutinised. This administration holds at the very front and centre of everything it does to protect, care and invest in our residents, and this is seen so clearly in our journey from needs improvement to outstanding. The report highlights what we want to see for all our families in the borough, living safely at home, in communities, and where this isn't possible, we want the very best for our vulnerable children and adults. And it really shows how during the last 10 years of austerity, we have achieved that ambition. Our previous Ofsted in July 2016 was judged requires improvement to be good. A comprehensive action plan was drawn up to ensure that our provision for all children was the best it could be. The investment of this administration and forward innovative thinking and sound financial management has enabled this to happen. Our budget for 17-18 to 2021 has been increased by this administration, increased by 53%. That's been 13.77 million, at a time when the rate support grant was reduced by 46%, 8.48 million. Our Ofsted report was published in March, with the outcome of our children's services being outstanding. The report is an absolute delight to read, with comments such as, "We aspire for a service for every child that they would welcome for their own. Children are valued and receive child-focused services. Child protection work is highly effective. The voice of the child is a real strength. The response to children facing risks from outside of the family is very strong and an area of excellent practice." I could continue, there are many, but I think one that really stands out for me is children are cared for and they're cared about. This is the ethos of our children's services team. We continue to improve practice, always wanting the very best for our children. We've been successful in our application and will be implementing the Hertfordshire Strengthening Families model. Our own belonging strategy, together with the Strengthening Families programme, will support families to keep them together where it is safe to do so. It is a collaborative way of working and helps achieve even better outcomes for our children. Ofsted say we have an impressive range of specialist services that improve the well-being and help protect children from harm. We are the only authority in the West Midlands to have received this judgment. Lastly, I just want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of our staff and the administration, and especially Councillor Paul Watling, who over the last 10 years with myself has enabled this journey. They are the very reason we are outstanding. Thank you on behalf of the children of Telford and Wrekin.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you very much, Shirley. Is that seconded? And can I come to Paul Watling to second it?
Yes, thanks, Leader. I do second the motion. Obviously, it's been a very long journey. When we took power in 2011, we were in a very difficult position with Children's Services, had no Director of Children's Services in place. It wasn't a positive place to be in. But we saw the vision, we had the vision to move this forward at a time when we shouldn't have been able to, with the swinging cuts from central government, and other places you will see have found it difficult to improve their services during this time. I am personally proud of what our officers have done, Shirley, and thank you for your comments. I think they've done a brilliant job at difficult times, and they've thought innovatively always about how we offer those services. It's not been, we must do it this way because this is the way we've always done it. It's been, how can we do it differently? We need to think differently about those services. As I say, I'm really, really proud of what the officers and the children and families of Telford and Wrekin have achieved, and we should be proud as a town.
Thank you very much, Paul. If I can come to Richard.
Yes, I mean, I was just going to come in and Richard. I mean, this report, although it's a cabinet, it's a fantastic outcome for this council, and that's thanks to Shirley and Paul as cabinet leads, and also you, leader, for your philosophy of wanting to invest in this service and make it as good as it can, because our children is our future, and you know, the officers and the staff should be proud of this achievement. And it's something, you know, it's just been hidden away low down in the report, but it's a fantastic outcome for this borough council.
Thank you, Richard. I think just to pick up on Shirley and Paul's point, this has been 10 years in the making, really. And actually, one of the things I'm most proud about is that every part of the council has contributed to it. We've significantly put our own council funding into this. Again, often when we were being criticised for overspending in children's services, we were continually brave enough to make the decisions to put money into this service area, and we're going to listen later on to another report around adults, which is exactly the same, where we were not dissuaded from those people who said it was a bad thing to be putting money into those two service areas. We've continued to invest, and as I said to our staff when we've met, if you work in our regeneration department, you are as responsible for this report as our social workers, because you've made sure that the money has come in so we can invest. And I think clearly I want to pay a particular tribute to Clive Jones, our Director of Children's Services. Clive, who retires this year, has an absolute first-class legacy, not just in children's services but also in adult services. And as I say, we're going to come on to that in a moment or two. But I want to say thank you to all our staff, all of our cabinet members, past and present, over the last few years, because it has been an absolute dream. Clearly, and as people know, I've said this over and over again, the challenge is to stay where we are, and that's what we want to do. There are other councils in the region that have secured outstanding and then lost that quite quickly, so we need to ensure that we keep this, and I know that everybody is completely determined to do that. So thank you very much, everybody. If I go to Bill Tomlinson, you've indicated.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I want to echo all the plaudits that have come on this report. It's important. I think residents always think of the council as the people that pick up the bins, and I think if you've lived like I have, thankfully, in a very well brought up, sheltered family, looked after by both parents, and my wife's the same, it's sometimes hard for residents to understand and fully appreciate how difficult some children's lives are and family lives are without actually having an experienced it themselves. And it can be so easy to dismiss it, saying, oh well, let them get on with it. It's their own making, they've created these problems themselves. Until you've been through issues and you've experienced that some life changes can affect you in such a way that you can't always bring up a family properly, it is difficult to understand. But there's a desperate need, and the most important thing is the children that are brought up in these families don't choose to be brought up in this way. And society needs to be there to help and support those youngsters that get into those awful situations that need our support. I particularly welcome now where we're putting even more effort and looking to change the way, and Paul picked up the fact you can't just do the things that you've done before, you need to keep thinking how can we do things better, and to tackle the problem at its source, at the family, and not just give support to the child, but help those parents with parenting skills and support so that they can hopefully keep their family together, I think is wonderful. The brave step that the local authority took, which other authorities have been forced down, which is to put more money into this service whilst our actual grants from the government are being cut, has been a very bold one, but a necessary one to support the most vulnerable in society. So I wish to give my congratulations to all those members of staff who've wholeheartedly engaged in this, which for some people will be a job so difficult, so emotional, so hard, that a lot of people wouldn't want to do it. And I'd also give my support, particularly to those officers, because pay has always been a problem recruiting social workers. So the more pay you give, sometimes it actually makes it better in the long run, because it means you keep that service intact. The fact we try and do it more in-house, the fact we've managed to encourage more foster carers to come under the local authority, and we're not so dependent on an agency, all of those things has helped us to help keep families together. And I really, really want to thank everyone for all their efforts in this.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much indeed for those comments. There's no other indicators, so it's been moved and seconded. Again, I'll take silence as an agreement. Thank you very much for those who contributed to this this agenda item. If I can then go to Andy Burford on CQC outstanding again, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Really pleased to introduce another success story for Telford and Wrekin. This service, Shared Lives, was given an outstanding rating when it was inspected by the Care Quality Commission last December. Now, it's again, as the point you've made, Leader, this has been championed by my predecessors in this role, including Councillor Paul Watling, and by senior managers throughout, and that has been one of the reasons for its success. It's been the perseverance and the determination to see this scheme and this project through. The scheme works by placing people who need support to live independently in a carer's home. Now, when you say it like that, it sounds the most natural and easy thing to do. It gives people, often adults with learning disabilities or vulnerable older people, a chance to benefit from family life and to gain confidence and independence. But this is painstaking work to match people up with the right carer and ensure the right expectations and ground rules. It's personalised, sensitive work and involves ongoing support. When it works, as it does in Telford and Wrekin, then the payoff for all concerned is absolutely huge. So my congratulations and appreciations go to the small dedicated team who carry out this work and whose efforts have now been recognised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burford. Councillor Overton, Richard Overton, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'll second the report while I'm on, but I just want to say I have seen this in action, you know, somebody in a shared life situation, and the independence and growth that person's got from being in that situation is second to none, and it's an amazing thing. And the work and the staff do at our council, again, shows that investment helps. You know, people say, oh, you stop throwing money at things, but when you can invest in your services and look at different ways of working, different models of working, things can work for the benefit of all our residents. And Andy, the team, you know, thanks to Paul and Andy in investing in this, the team can be proud of what they've achieved here, and to get it standing again is phenomenal, you know, in the austerity years that we've had. So thanks to all the council staff in delivering this, and as I said, I've seen this in action, and it is the outcomes are so much positive than going to a day centre or things like that.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the points you made earlier about both this and the previous Ofsted outstanding results being actually the success of the whole council and each and every one of our staff in every single department within the council. As we heard at the top of the agenda, you know, £123 million cut in the last 10 years. That has meant that the administration since 2011 has had to make very difficult decisions about where resources are directed, and at the very core of all of those decisions has been the need to protect the most vulnerable in our community, and that's, you know, our adults in need of social care support and our vulnerable children. And that has meant that resources, diminishing resources have had to be directed in that area, and that's meant that the level of cuts in other areas, or the pressure to increase income in other areas, is much harder. And I think the thing that strikes me, and I say this as someone who's been on the council for just over a year and previously worked in other local authorities, is that the culture within the organisation from every single member of staff is one where they understand that the role of our authority, that what we're trying to do is to protect the most vulnerable. So even if they're working in a completely different department, they understand that they're being asked to increase income because it supports those other vital services, and everyone buys into it. And I just think that's a really positive culture, and it allows the kind of creativity and the innovation that leads to really good services like the Shared Lives scheme. And so, you know, it's everybody across the whole organisation needs to really be very proud of the last two reports and the achievements that have been made.
Thank you, Carolyn. Dave Wright?
I just wanted to say that this is an incredible success story for the local authority, and if you look at the report, it's actually good value for money as well. So if you actually read the detail, it shows that not only does it deliver fantastic outcomes, and I really was impressed with the case study Adam story in the report, which is really quite moving, and quite rightly so. So it should be, because that's giving somebody great independence. But it's value for money as well, because it reduces costs long term. It provides a better quality service. So it's a win all round, and it's something we can all support, I'm sure. And sometimes when people say to me, well, the council only empties my bins, well, this just shows that it doesn't just empty your bin, it does a whole range of other services and really caters for the needs of people locally. And it's a project that we can rightly be very, very proud of.
Thank you, David. There's no... oh, sorry, Shirley?
Yeah, just a very quick one, really, and it's echoing a lot of what's been said around the room. Shared Lives, it's a brilliant strategy. You work with adults to improve their lives and actually the lives of others. The carers provide such an amazing change in people's lives, giving them independence, life chances. And if we hadn't invested in these opportunities wouldn't have existed. We've chosen to invest in these areas of the service of care, both adults and children, and that investment has been shown very, very clearly that it works and pays massive dividends. So actually it's just a big thank you to all our staff to enable us to do this.
Thank you, Shirley. And finally, before I sum up, Bill Tomlinson?
Yeah, it goes with both reports, really. A big, big thank you, and I echo what Caroline Healy said. It's amazing what our staff have done. And at Telford and Wrekin, we have got a big heart. And if I could, and we didn't have COVID-19 regulations, I think all staff deserve a great big squadge. So I'd like that minuted, please, because it's also important to remember the squadge a day keeps the doctor away. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Can I just say that these two reports really do, for me, sum up everything this administration's about. It's about protecting, it's about investing, and it's about caring. And actually, these two pieces of report really, really do go to the heart of every one of those three words, and that's the thing that drives us as an administration. And as it's been said quite rightly, often councillors' inboxes are not filled with emails about adult social care or safeguarding children. Often it's the potholes, and it's the roads, and it's the footpaths, and it's the bins, and those services produce the greatest of pressures on local councillors' time, but actually in terms of cost is the service area that we spend least on when you compare it to children and adults. So I'm really, really proud. It's something we can all be proud about. I do think that those people that have used the last 10 years to attack the approach of this administration need to read both external reports to understand what external people are saying about us, and maybe just have a degree of humility by actually not only welcoming the report, but not sitting in silence when both reports have been brought to Cabinet, because they've been proven wrong, wrong and wrong again. So thank you very much, everybody, for today. I'll take silence as an agreement in regards to the recommendations, and I'll call the meeting to an end. Thank you very much, everybody.